The Cleveland Browns ended up not trading a quarterback. They waived veteran Tyler Huntley, a couple other roster moves, but we're getting ready for the regular season. We're going to break it all down. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate everybody that makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The numbers keep going up. Don't miss out. Join the everyday crowd. Subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. We are joined by the OBR's Pete Smith. Look, we try to get Pete in here as much as we can. Busy for him, all the work at the OBR, obviously the Streetsboro program, heading into week 2 after being victorious week 1. Congratulations all around. Tyler Huntley, the move was made. And look, I think we kind of should have had a feeling that maybe there wasn't much of a market for Tyler Huntley when, there was talks of maybe that teams were inquiring about Jameis Winston, teams were inquiring about DTR. So you're always trying to, keep that tool going, to keep the flame going. But there were plenty of teams as of yesterday when they first got down to 53 that only had 2 quarterbacks on the roster. If it didn't happen yesterday, it kind of felt more and more like maybe it wasn't going to happen. Does he return to the practice squad? Certainly possible. But the Browns, at the end of the day, however you're going to slice it up, they ended up with the 3 best quarterbacks that they had this summer on the roster. That is the ultimate goal. Pete, some thoughts on that? And also, the way this worked with the rule, does this mean that most teams should probably just keep 3 on the 53-man roster?
I think it depends on your situation. If the Browns didn't have a promising young quarterback, I wouldn't bother with it. I like DTR. I like DTR's talent. That's why I want him on the roster. If they had, let's put it this way, if it was Watson, Jameis Winston, and Tyler Huntley, or PJ Walker, or somebody else in that vein, I'd rather just have the roster spot. But that, to me, is what the third roster spot is for at quarterback. Having a young guy that you're excited about that can be your scout team quarterback, that can help your team get better every week while also developing. And I think DTR gives you that. But other than that, I don't care. And I mean, ultimately, if you're in a situation where you're on your third quarterback, you're probably in a world of hurt anyway. So, I mean, you need to have somebody that warrants the spot. Otherwise, you are probably going to have somebody else you'd rather have, an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, something, a DB, anything else, rather than a third quarterback, which you can just put on the practice squad, even if you can't sort of activate them like the rule that they wanted to implement.
Now, Pete, it's looking probably more and more like we're going to get Jack Conklin out at left tackle for week 1. And I think everybody's trying to paint the picture that they know what's going to go on here. That maybe Jed could be the swing. I don't think it's necessarily that Jedrick Wills is going to be the swing tackle. I think it's that we just don't know yet. And we know that Dewan has done nothing on the left side. That is what we know. They didn't work with it yet last year. They didn't attempt to work with it at all this, I guess summer, because nobody was essentially available in the spring for the Browns as far as the offensive tackles are concerned. And maybe because of Jack's injury, maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable with him on the left side, at least for week 1. But this looks to be what the plan is going to be for the offensive line. And look, you're trying to get your 5 best out there. You are playing the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I'd be really curious if Wills and Conklin and DeJuan Jones weren't coming back from injuries, would that have changed it? And specifically Wills and Conklin. I feel like they got to a point where they're like, DeJuan Jones is functional at right tackle. Let's not mess with it, because at least at that point in time, they only had 1 tackle. So moving him doesn't fix a problem. It just potentially creates another one. So you basically got to a point where you're like, let's just leave him there. We'll figure out what happens when these other guys get healthy and go that way. Like I have to think that if all of these guys were healthy throughout, DeJuan would have gotten a look at the left side at some point because it benefits you to take that look. You're not going to lose anything doing it, and you have a potential answer at a position which you are going to have to deal with. Now, if Jack Conklin could do it, great. Like, he could theoretically do it. I do think it creates some weird, awkward run like strengths for you, unless DeJuan Jones has improved in that area dramatically. I've not seen it to this point. I honestly, very concerning to me. But like, if Jack Conklin is good at left tackle, then your primary run strength is left. That's not the end of the world, but it's just a little bit awkward that Joel Bitonio is such a good mover as a guard, being able to pull and do some of those other things. Not to say Teller can't. We've seen him do things like trap block and pull around to the left and stuff like that. But it just sort of, everything was sort of catered to the right in the past. And obviously when the Browns have been at their best and when Conklin was an all-pro, it was on the right side and Nick Chubb flowing that way. So it's not ideal, but you can certainly do it. And ultimately it's a question of, to your point, get the best 5 out there. And I think that's ultimately where they're going to end up.
And not the ideal start for Coach Dickerson by any means whatsoever. Went almost all the way up until August without having his top 3 offensive tackles. Made it till, I guess, want to go 2-3 days ago, probably August 26th, 27th, before he got, at least one more of his starting tackles into the fold. Still, Jed is available, not practicing yet. So certainly, muddies the water. So not the ideal scenario there. I just do want to get to this before we get to segment 2 and start switching things up entirely. The tight end room, Pete, it was always weird. And, for me, maybe it was just being in the structure of it. Oh, it's got to be 3. It's got to be 3. It's got to be 3. You were more of, if it ain't worth it, it don't matter. And look, you're not going to have a guy that's going to step in if something happens to David Njoku anyway. But 2 guys brought into the practice squad. I think the idea of Latu might be a little bit of alluring. Good blocker, did have 12 touchdown receptions in his final 2 years at Alabama.
Sure. So obviously the Siaki Ika pick was nothing short of disastrous. This doesn't fix it, but they do get another 3rd round pick from that draft. That now has the potential to develop into something. If he does, great, you get an extra value, and maybe that sort of mitigates a little bit of the damage from that could have been that pick. But ultimately, Latu has been more of an inline guy, a true Y. I don't think he offers you a terribly dynamic receiving option. But, if David Njoku gets injured, which is the whole thing. I mean, he is the tight end position right now, and they want to get somebody who can get up there and sort of line up and do some of those things. Then Latu can theoretically do that, which is fine. They got a true Y, and then they got another F type in Whiteheart, the kid who played at Wake Forest. I'd be very curious to know if ultimately Trayton Welch just thought his options were better with the New Orleans Saints, because personally I think more highly of Trayton Welch than Whiteheart, but they got one of each, which is fine. Ultimately, I think that makes sense.
And even still, though, I mean, you can still go James Hudson blocking tight end, which is something James Hudson has been decent with, the least, the amount of time that you've asked him to do it. There are those options. But if we're talking about run blocking, we're talking about the running game, we can talk about the running back position. We're going to get to that as your latest Locked On Browns continues. Everybody, please stick around. When is the best time? When do you need that punch? For me, I get up at 4:45 in the morning. So when I'm at work and I hit that lunch hour, that is when I need the punch. So you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. 5-Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience store, drugstore, grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of a delicious energy 5-hour energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid through September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We are joined by the OBR's Pete Smith. I appreciate everybody that makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, the numbers keep going up, and I appreciate you all for that. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. As far as the 53-man roster is concerned, yes, Tyler Huntley was released. I don't think to a shock to anyone. We knew it was only a matter of time. Dante Foreman back on the 53-man roster. Also a running back brought in as well to the practice squad. Two things that I told you you're probably going to look out for. Pete, you look at it and, look, we know for at least September, Jerome Ford is most likely, ideally, your number one running back. Nothing has changed since last year when Nick went down. Jerome gives you a nice mix. Hopefully, he'll pick up a little bit on, the 0 to negative yard runs. Understand that, hey, if it's a yard, I'll just take the yard. But that's also where he and the offensive line, they have to work in unison. I know a lot of people pointed that statistic and want to put it on Jerome Ford. That was certainly a collective effort that led to that statistic from Jerome Ford. You have Foreman. Pierre Strong, the thing with Pierre Strong is, there's explosion there. It's kind of like Pierre Strong's kind of like a number 7 hitter. You may get 20 home runs, but you also may get 150 strikeouts. But this has been a huge part. And look, it started to change certainly last year with the injuries to Nick Chubb, certainly with to the offensive line, Pete. But for a team that was so great at running the football for so long, and now this is still the same regime. Obviously assistant coaches have changed. You're kind of reinventing yourself on the fly here, looking to throw the ball more. Certainly have the ammunition to do that, but you still need to run the ball when it counts. Where's the confidence level with the way the running back room is currently assembled?
I like Ford and Foreman. I'm not as convinced that Pierre Strong really adds anything other than potentially on special teams as a returner. His contact balance is frustratingly bad. I was a big fan of his coming out of college. Every time it seems like he's got an opportunity, he just falls down or trips over the hash or whatever.
Forgets the ball. The combination, and the other thing.
But I think Ford and Foreman is better than what they had last year. So long as Foreman can stay healthy. He gives you a hammer. He acts as sort of a governor if Ford is not doing what Deuce Staley wants, finishing runs, doing those things. But I like the combination. I think it can be fine for up until Nick Chubb is back and ready to go. I think Foreman gives you everything that Kareem Hunt did, maybe not as quite as effective as a receiving threat, but he's better as a just pure runner. So he's pretty good. I'm hoping that Ford can build on some of the momentum he gained from last year. I think he got better over the course of the year. He's got to carry that over. He's got to be more consistent. But I also think lowering his usage a little bit would be good for him. Hopefully you get better touches out of if he's taking fewer of them. So we'll see how it goes. But obviously the key here really is going to be the offensive line. Can they open up holes for these guys? If they can do it, then I think the Browns are going to be fine. If they want to spread them out, that should create some, favorable situations, and that could help them quite a bit as well.
Now, with the way that works there, and the Nyheim Hines thing, once we got to in the preseason games and Nyheim wasn't doing anything, I'm not sure where the Browns were with that. Was it a surprise that Hines is also going to be minimum October as well? Who knows? But certainly a tough blow. With the two running backs, and Hines is kind of be a guy that's going to contribute like a jack of all trades. So certainly a tough loss as far as that one is concerned. The practice squad running back Gary Brightwell. I don't know if anybody remembers, but if you remember, maybe Chris Ivory a few years ago played some time with the Jets, played some time with the Saints. I'm not comparing. Chris Ivory certainly had a nice little career for himself, but Gary Brightwell, if you want to talk like that bumper car running back that seems to kind of crash and everything and runs 100 million miles an hour like his hair's on fire, that is what you would get with a guy like Gary Brightwell. Pete, now the wide receiver group, and it was weird for some. I don't get it. Now, it seemed pretty cut and dry, the 6 wide receivers that were going to be on this team. And, Mike Woods does come back to the practice squad. Prochet, Jalen Darden, and even the other guy brought in the practice squad today, all pretty much cut from the same cloth here. But this 6 collectively, it's by far one of the deepest wide receiver groups in the now 8 years I've been covering this team, by far. And there can be times where any one of these guys can be on the field. I think the confidence levels should be there with any one of what these 6 guys are capable of. And if it's anything, with the offensive line questions as far as just everybody trying to return to health. Deshaun, admittedly known to everybody throughout the league, is somebody that maybe holds on to the ball longer than most. But if there's anything that can maybe get Deshaun going as far as, picking up the pace, getting rid of the ball quickly, it should be the confidence level he has in guys he's throwing to, and maybe also that he's got questions, certainly, about, the amount of guys, blocking for him, and he just doesn't know where they're at just yet.
Right. So obviously Amari Cooper is Amari Cooper. He's just a great wide receiver, and getting Jerry Jeudy in there gives you a lot of opportunities. You have David Njoku, which should help out everybody. And then you have Elijah Moore coming off of a career year in yardage, even if it was sort of a uneven sort of roller coaster of a year in terms of not only his efficiency, but just how the Browns utilized him. Cedric Tillman, by all accounts, has taken every criticism from last year and sort of really worked on it. And certainly that last preseason game didn't hurt anyone's feelings in terms of being able to showcase what he's capable of. But there's talk that they really like Jamari Thrash already, and David Bell seems to be a better fit with this offense, with the ability to sort of play his leverage and find his own openings and those type of things. There's always the potential for miscommunications when you have 2 different people or multiple people thinking of what they see, reads, whatever, but it should create some more open opportunities. Throughout the preseason, you saw nothing but open receivers. So maybe that's a good indication of where this thing's going. But there's plenty of potential here. Now it's just a question of, can they make it work? If you're looking at this sort of as a reflection on Deshaun Watson, it's not an excuse to be unsuccessful.
One I keep talking about, and everybody, because and look, we know where the pressure comes from, and we certainly know how some people feel about Deshaun, but look, we got to evaluate the game that's in front of us. But I think the key thing for Deshaun, Pete, this year, it's not about total yardage. It's not about touchdown passes. More important things to probably discuss are going to be completion percentage and probably interceptions.
Yeah, protect the football, don't get hurt. That's it. If you can,
it's cliche for a guy making what he's making, but ideally, the way this team is structured, that is it.
Yeah, and I think he's got to sort of embrace that a little bit and not try to make the $230 million throw all the time. Just get it out of your hands. Let your guys, be playmakers and trust your defense. I'm convinced that if he just plays, staying healthy, he will get better. If he just gets the ball out and trusts his guys, he will get more opportunities to then make the big plays. What does that equate in terms of how good he can be? I have no idea. But it's certainly going to be better than what we've seen from him to this point. And if he just does those things and is average, the Browns are now a contender for the division. That's a really low bar, but that's where they're at.
And look, that should be the expectation. Again, the money, the deal, the investment that was made, the draft capital, be one of the 22. Go out there and play your role. Deshaun does that. Everything else should probably just fall into line. We're going to talk a little bit of the defense. How can we not talk about the defense? So we're going to continue here. Your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. We are winding down towards the end of summer. Look, some last opportunities. Maybe you want to go catch the Guardians. Maybe you want to catch a baseball game. I'm sure you want to get out and check out the Cleveland Browns. Music, anytime, anywhere. Concert, you want to see it, you go check it out. That's why you check out Game Time. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. They filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The joys of working with Game Time. You have seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat on the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee on our Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They don't fluff through it. You get the price, you get the fees all in one. It's not like when you go from window to window to window and all of a sudden you had a $60 ticket and you're paying $160 when you get ready to check out. They don't do that at Game Time. Your purchase is also covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Closing out your latest Locked On Browns, the OBR's Pete Smith is here. As always, I appreciate you all for making the show your first listen. Become an everydayer. Don't miss any of the action. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Pete, we didn't get to see a good amount of this defense this summer, understandably. I'm extremely excited because I think there are so many returning parts, and it went so well last year. I want to see where this team now plays with even more confidence, with even more swagger on the defensive side of the ball. Quentin Jefferson brought in one of the few changes on defensive line. One of the other ones we're probably going to have to wait a little bit on, of course, in Mike Hall Jr. I think Jordan Hicks joining the linebacker room, it gives JOK, in my opinion, the best linebacker he's played with up until this point on a consistent week in, week out presence. The secondary, I think they made the right choice in keeping the 6 guys at corner who can cover. They still have the 5 safeties here. We'll see if that continues up until that time we kick it off against the Dallas Cowboys. But it's hard to find whether or not there's any questions on this D, Pete, other than, can they at least be what they were or perhaps be even better?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that sets up well for them to be better. I mean, the questions start with slot, and seemingly Greg Newsome is back. If he's truly ready to go, it's such a relief for that group. And credit to him, he had to have worked his butt off to get back that quickly. I still have questions about what the surgery actually involved, but who cares?
You say hamstring surgery, that just scares us. Yeah. Hamstring pull alone is enough,
I mean, but beyond that, I mean, you just look at this group and it's just strengths. I mean, the other question I would have is backup nose. And maybe they're content to just promote Juwan Briggs when they need somebody. But, if Dalvin Tomlinson were to get actually hurt, I think they'd be in a world of hurt. But beyond that, to your point, I think Jordan Hicks is a big get for them, improves their overall athleticism. I think, you look at just the corners in general, everybody seems to be thinking Martin Emerson's prime for a monster year. I think Grant Delpit is phenomenal at what he needs to be doing and gives you a guy who can cover tight ends at a high level and do everything else the safety does. Juan Thornhill just regresses back to the mean. He's going to be infinitely better than he was last year. And then, they did not sleep on trying to improve the defensive line further. Quentin Jefferson is a big addition in terms of getting another pure pass rusher. We'll see what happens with Mike Hall and when he's actually able to be used. But like Alex Wright, can he take another step forward? Zadarius Smith's pressures and everything else suggested he should have had way more, production on a stat sheet that people would sort of look at and go sacks and pressure. So if he can repeat that, he's probably due to have a whole lot of, a lot more on the stat sheet. And then, Myles Garrett, I mean, he has, obviously he's coming back from being defensive player of the year, but it's like, you sort of take him for granted. He's really good. The further we get away from the season, I think you go back and you sort of have a case for him as the MVP, considering that so many people seem to think that no one else on the Browns is like a top 100 player. So if that's the case, then he should be even better than that. So they've just got a ton of talent on that and depth. I mean, obviously, if injuries happen, they've still got Cameron Mitchell. They've still got, Khalif Halasi. They've still got guys like Ronnie Hickman and Rodney McLeod. They've got, a lot of guys that should be more comfortable in this year. If it's true that they are pissed based on what happened in the playoffs and that has focused them, they could be, every game could be them trying to go out and prove a point, which is pretty terrifying if they are, obviously another year in the system. They've added some things to try to change up how they can attack opposing offenses. That could really be fun to watch. And, it could end up being a much better product against more difficult competition.
Yeah, one of the things I take away from, over the summer was, there was, a lot of national people there for the joint practices with the Minnesota Vikings, and they could not stop talking about the Browns defense. Now, keep in mind, Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome were not participating. Also, keep in mind, so that means the younger corners were playing. Also, keep in mind, your pass rush is limited. You can only do so much in a situation like that because they don't want quarterbacks getting affected or whatever. So you think of the fact that, Myles Garrett was basically, neutered or muzzled in something like that. The top Browns corners weren't playing, but yet people came away and they could not stop talking about the Cleveland Browns defense. So again, offense, just do what you have to do because the defense should certainly be pulling, a lot of heavy weight. Pete Smith, make sure you're checking everything out. Pete and the crew of the OBR, they just, keep plugging along day in, day out. I mean, for all of us, comes that time of the year where, you wish your best to your family and, your friends and, hey, maybe, all goes well. We'll see you, sometime late February. It's what we do. We love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. So make sure you check out all the content over the OBR. Make sure you are following at Pete Smith _. Just continue here another year here as we get ready to tee it up here. And I guess from now, it's probably about 9 days or so. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. I appreciate everybody who makes the show their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, you're a bunch of filthy animals, but you're my filthy animals. I suggest you all become a filthy animal. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Become an everydayer. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go Browns.